go to Senator Baldwin. I think Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And like my colleague, Senator Klobuchar, I've been jumping between committees, so it looks like I missed a show and tell at the beginning, but I'll wait till after the hearing to catch up on that. I also want to chime in along with my colleagues about restoring American leadership in semiconductor manufacturing, that Wisconsin would make an ideal location for some of that expansion, just planting that seed. But as we're well aware, right now Congress is on the brink of putting together a conference committee to advance the variously named competition bill. And I hope that we will do our jobs without delay. But during the debate over the CHIPS Act, many pointed out the generous incentives provided by foreign governments to domestic manufacturers. However, few have noted the different spending priorities of foreign competitors, particularly on the issue of stock buybacks. For example, over the last 20 years, looking at that time horizon, Intel spent about 64% of its net income on buybacks, a whopping $127 billion, while Samsung spent only 10% and Taiwan Semiconductor spent 2%. So as a supporter of the CHIPS Act, I want to ensure that the federal government gets a proper return on its investment, namely an increase in the domestic semiconductor manufacturing base. And as such, I'd like to ask each of the semiconductor manufacturer witnesses to briefly describe your spending plans for the next few years and explain how you envision CHIPS funding potentially fitting into them. And if I could start with Intel, Mr. Gelsinger.
Thank you. I came to the role as CEO slightly over a year ago. I ceased our buyback policy immediately upon my arrival. I laid out to Wall Street a radical increase in our capital expenditures, more than doubling them, taking the free cash flow of Intel negative for the first time in over 3 decades, reducing our profitability by 600 basis points, more than doubling our long-term capital investments, and indicating to the street that I expected to see that level only increase for the rest of the decade. This is the largest capital build-out probably done by any company in any industry in history. The majority of that will land on American soil. But I do not believe that's enough, and I can't do it myself. The CHIPS Act is intended, from my perspective, to enable me to go bigger and faster than the bold commitments that we have already made that have reached very negative response from Wall Street. We want to do more and faster. This is all about restoring U.S. competitive, bringing back this mantle from Asia on a critical industry, not only for our economy, but also our national security. We're all in.
Thank you. Mr. Murata.
Senator Baldwin, as I highlighted earlier, Micron is the only company in the US that manufactures semiconductor memory and storage. And semiconductor memory and storage represents nearly 60% of the worldwide wafer production. And we are the only company here manufacturing and developing leading-edge technologies. Today, we are the global leader in technology for DRAM and NAND, ahead of all other global competitors in developing that technology and putting it into production. We have done so by making billions and billions and tens of billions, more than that, investments over the course of last few years in leading-edge R&D and investments in manufacturing. We'll always prioritize our investments in R&D and manufacturing to be able to secure leadership for Micron in semiconductor memory technology and to be able to meet the growing needs in this world of data economy for more data solutions, which we make, memory and storage solutions. So that will always be our highest priority. As part of that, we have announced in October of last year that over the decade, we will be investing more than $150 billion in leading-edge R&D and manufacturing. So that is the priority, to continue to drive innovation, to continue to invest in R&D, to continue to support the manufacturing. That's our plan, and that's our focus.
And Mr. Archer.
Yes, so Senator Baldwin, we manufacture the machines that are used to make the chips. And so our priorities for the future are the same as they've been the last couple of years, which is to expand our capacity. Nearly 70% of our manufacturing capacity is in the U.S. We spend about 90% of our R&D in the U.S. Last year was $1.5 billion. Our priorities for the future are just to continue to invest to accelerate innovation in support of the domestic and global semiconductor manufacturing industry in order to try to alleviate many of the global shortages that we've seen in chips that are affecting so many different industries. And so we're going to just continue to invest to maintain our leadership in this space.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin.